Welcome to the Freedom Experience. I'm your host, Jean Moncrief, and today my guest is Tom Walter. Tom is the founder and CEO and ultimately became the chief cultural officer of a Chicago-based company called Tasty Catering. In 2024, Tom was inducted into the Small Giants Hall of Fame as founder and CEO for 2024. Now, for me, Tom embodies what it means to be a serial entrepreneur. He took a small family-owned hot dog stand that he and his brothers started and turned that into one of the top 4 catering businesses in the Chicago area. And that group now has revenue surpassing 85 million. But Tom's journey wasn't always easy. And in this episode, Tom shares how at one point back in 2005, he hit rock bottom, facing addiction, debt, and near business failure, and how a wake-up call from a couple of employees set about a cultural revolution in Tasty Catering and how that transformed that business. We talk about creating a thriving company, about maximizing discretionary effort and eliminating workplace disruptors, and the surprising impact of something as simple as just fixing a squeaky door on their sales performance. Tom's story is one of resilience. It's one of transformation and of the power of disciplined freedom in business. So with that, let's dive in. Tom, welcome to the show.
It's always good to see you, Jean. Always good.
Feelings mutual. I was reflecting on this award and I was thinking about the time that we've known each other. I'm curious, what are some of the highlights over the past decades on the road to becoming CEO of the Year in the Small Giants?
Well, I've been an entrepreneur for quite a long time, and I found, and in the hospitality industry, it's very important. I've been an entrepreneur in the hospitality field for over 50 years, and during that time, I realized how important relationships were, but I never was a relationship-based person. And that all started to change in 2005 when we had a minor cultural revolution within our company. But it's really grown during the Small Giants because I've met wonderful, intelligent people that understand the value of values in a business, such as yourself and many other of our mutual friends. And that gave me the support, or it gave me peer mentors, whether they knew that or not. But I became a follower of quite a few of the guys and ladies in the Small Giants, and it helped turn our company around and helped us make it much more successful.
And I think we both had very similar experiences. You talk about that revolution back in 2005. What happened at that time for you? What did you go through?
I have 2 brothers who are partners at that time. One brother we've since bought out, but we moved into a much larger facility, and we're selling our restaurants, and we're going to focus on Tasty Catering and grow it as a company. And it's a major catering company in Chicago, one of the 4 largest. And during that change, we went from a 5,000 square foot building to a 25,000 square foot building, and my brothers and I became territorial, arguing over who was going to be in charge of what space, because we grew up in a 3-bedroom home with 11 brothers and sisters, and there just wasn't space. And so during this argument, the first week we were in this building, it got pretty heated and pretty vulgar in front of women, and it was just terrible behavior. And I had become a boss. I had become everything I hated in a leader, giving orders and demanding people do things and using my power and strength of signing the front of a paycheck to get my way. Yeah. And one day, shortly after moving in, within the first week we moved into this building, Jamie and Tim, 2 of our staff members that were in their early 20s, and these 2 people I had hoped would be the future of our company, because they were both brilliant. I'd known them a long time. Tim is my son, and Jamie was one of his best friends, part of his group in school. But they came to my desk one Monday morning and said to me, "If you don't change, we're leaving." And I couldn't afford to lose them. I just couldn't. And I said, change what? And they said, we don't want your style of management anymore. We want a leader, and we want the company to be based on values set up by the employees. And that led to a major change in our company. And they were joined by Aaron, another young person. And Aaron said that, named me chief culture officer and said, you focus on the culture, the behaviors of an organization. Organizational behavior is antecedents lead to behaviors, lead to consequences or outcome, ABC. And I'd never really understood that theory. And she said, you focus on how we're giving you the core values. We're giving you the antecedents, the basis for our company. And it's up to you as the senior leader of the company to make sure we all behave. The behaviors follow the antecedents, and you won't have to worry about the outcome. You won't have to worry about whether the company will do good or not, because it will do good. And by God, she was right. She was absolutely correct. From that point on, that was 2005. I haven't paid much attention to the financials, maybe quarterly or at the end of a year. But what I do focus on is employee engagement and looking in people's eyes and seeing if they're happy or sad, and understanding that. So that was the major change in our company. And Jamie and Tim and Aaron all became partners of ours, and they started their own businesses, and their businesses became very successful. And now they're fellow CEOs, and it's a great peer mentorship program with the next generation.
There's so much in what you said then. One of the things that I'm curious about is what happened after that Monday morning. Was that an immediate switch over for you? Or did you step away and think, what's going on here? How did you react to that message when it came across from Jamie and Tim initially?
Part of me resisted it because, obviously the ego of an owner, the ego of any person resists it because it's an extrinsic force, and intrinsically from within, I didn't want anybody telling me how to be a leader. But I was so desperate, I'd hit bottom, just like I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, but I hit bottom many years ago and got straight and sober. And when you really hit a bottom, you want change. But we had just bought the property, and the property was millions of dollars, and we were deeply in debt, and I couldn't just quit. I just couldn't say, I'm giving you my notice, I'm out, because I had this debt that was going to follow me until I was dead or it was paid off. So I was so desperate and so in my bottom that I wanted any way to get out of it. And when they assumed leadership and said we're going to change, I was all for it. And they had a plan. They had been talking to each other, and with Aaron, the three of them had been speaking for a while. And they bought the book Good to Great because it came in Spanish and English. And the majority of our workforce is Spanish then until today. Probably 70% are immigrants from Mexico and countries in Northern South America, Central America. And Jamie had this plan about breaking the company down into teams, not necessarily divisions underneath each brother, but sometimes they were cross teams. Some people that worked under my chain of command and some that worked under my brother Larry's. And they were given an hour each week to do a book club. And they would read a chapter and then discuss it. And this started in November of 2005. And by March of 2006, they wanted to have a meeting to put the values together, because they gotten to the point where everybody was contributing within the teams what they thought were their personal values. They were demands. This is the way we want to be led. This is the way we want to be treated. And so there were 7 leaders of those teams that we chose the leadership based on emotional intelligence. And they could have been young people. Some were young and some were older, but they were all emotionally intelligent, and they were mature, and they had the right personalities. These were the people I would like to make a whole company out of, these folks. And so they went into a meeting in a conference room on a Tuesday in March of 2006, and I said to Jamie, can my brothers and I, do you want us to sit at the table? She says, we don't want you in the room. This is not about you. If you sit at the table, you're going to have a presence that's going to be like the big elephant in the room, and no one's going to participate. They're going to be intimidated. And I said, but this is vital. It's life-changing of our company, and I want to see this. I want to witness it. And she says, okay, you can sit in the corner. And so my brothers and I were put in a corner off, not on the conference table. And I said to her, what if we have a question? Do you want me to raise my hand so you can then call on me when it fits conducively into your program? And she says, well, you can raise your hand if you want, but I'm not going to call on you. This is not about you. It's about them, and it's about what they want. And of course, I was taken aback by that because she was 22 years old or something at that age. And I said, oh, okay. But then they started writing the core values on the wall, and I was just shocked because I thought there would be 50 or 60. And I'm thinking, all right, everybody's going to have their own input on this, and the whiteboard's going to be filled with all these meaningless words. And there were only about 10 of them or 15 of them that everybody in the company chose. These were, and it was all of their own volition. But, like some people had ethics and integrity and morality and quality of behavior and respect and all, and it was consistently the same. And years later, I was at a business conference leading a session, and I took a bunch of business owners to demonstrate this core value. And I divided them up into teams, and there were like 5 major teams, and I asked them to come up with the 3 most important core values, or 5, whatever it was. And again, there was only 12 or 14 because everybody agreed that there was a human need to be treated with respect. So the first core value they wrote out on the board was, Tim had condensed a couple of them, and he wrote, "Will always be moral, ethical, and legal." I said, whoa. Okay, we're not going to have liars here because we can fire them if they lie. They're not following the values. And the second one was treat all with respect. And at that point I said, this is beautiful. If this is what the employees want, this is what I want. And so then they came up with 5 more. There were 7 altogether. But the first 2 were about individual behavior. And the next 3 were about behavior within the organization. Quality in everything we do, high service standards, competitiveness, a strong determination to be the best. And we wanted to be the best caterer, period. And then 6 and 7 were unique because it empowered every person to be a leader of their own area. And number 6 was individual discipline, a focus on individual discipline. And the individual discipline meant if you were a salad preparer, you were in charge of salads. And you could you make any alterations you needed, and you could schedule your own time, but it had to be produced within the agreed period. And then number 7 gave them the freedom. Number 7 is freedom and responsibility within your circle of discipline. And that allowed crew leaders, if a mistake went on a job, to be empowered to make decisions. They didn't have to call up the office and say, what should I do? And we celebrated those first few major decisions. We had one young lady tell a person at an event that they didn't have to pay us any money because we violated our values and we didn't have the right wine, and the beer was flat because it had been tapped earlier. And all these things went wrong, and a 19-year-old young lady made a decision and said, you're not paying for this. And the owner of the company was dumbfounded. But that client, 15 years later, is still a very solid client of ours. And so then we made a big deal. We celebrated these small victories within the organization, saying, yes, you're empowered to make those decisions. And to this day, I just heard a story yesterday about 2 college students that are new to us that were delivering in downtown Chicago. And they had to change their whole delivery process because of construction in the city. And they never called the office at all. They just changed their system and got it set up on time and made the customer very happy and came back like, it's what we do. We have the ability to make those decisions. So it was fascinating to watch this happen. And then the next problem was, how do we make this deep within the person? An interesting thought, Jean, is that in the beginning, when we went through this, Jamie followed a very strict pattern. She had a pattern in mind of how to do it. In fact, after 2 years of our culture change, she wanted to benchmark it, and she started entering best places to work. that did scoring that would let us know where we were. And she started to do employee engagement scores to find out if our employees were very engaged. Before the culture change, our employee engagement was about 40%, and our turnover was also in the 40s. I mean, that's a lot of money to lose in
Yeah.
training employees.
And I feel like that's where most organizations are at the moment, somewhere at that 40%, if not lower, in terms of employee engagement.
Tasty Catering is at 4% now, and we have many employees been with us over 30 years. And in this industry, that's unheard of to have a 4% turnover.
Wow. So that is really low.
Yes. What Jamie did is she followed this academic by the name of Kotter, Kotter, his system of change. And the academics that came in and started doing research on Tasty, we're focused on 6 doctoral dissertations, and we've been featured in many academic journals about this change. And they said, you followed Kotter perfectly. And we said, who's Kotter? But it was inherent within Jamie that this, it was, first you create a big crisis, and that was the big showdown with the owner. And then you set up teams to do the change. Then you celebrate small victories. And then you set goals that everybody agrees to, and you communicate. These were the 8 steps of Kotter's change. And we did it, and it worked phenomenally. And then there was the next thing was, once the behaviors were solidly identified with the 7 core values, they finished the culture statement according to Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great. And one of his other requests was, or one of his other statements was the BHAG, Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And our team came up, the employees came up with, we will be the most recognized and respected brand in our industry. And I thought, aha, I have them. They made a mistake. I said, where's catering? We're a caterer. And one of the employees looked at me and said, well, if we put catering there, that's all we're going to be. But we could be anything as long as we're the most respected and recognized brand in our industry. And the employees that led that change started 7 companies, and each one of them is the most recognized and respected brand in their industry, or one of the most recognized and respected brand.
So it's carried right the way through. I mean, basically, Tasty Catering has been the sort of genesis for a whole lot of other businesses that have carried those values and are solving one of the biggest problems we have in the world. Entrepreneurship is creating jobs, creating great places for people to work.
Yes, and by core value number 6, where everybody has their individual discipline, circle of discipline, and number 7, the freedom and responsibility for what you're in charge of. Everybody became a leader, and so we address all of our team members as leaders. And it fostered entrepreneurial spirits. Well, we could do this better. Our restaurant, our catering kitchens aren't producing 24 hours a day, so why don't we start a commercial bakery during the off hours, and we can make muffins and rolls and things and sell them to other people. And step by step, they started these businesses, and all were successful. And during the change in 2005, we're about $2 or $3 million, maybe, in Tasty Catering, and we were probably in the top 10% of caterers in Chicago. And last year, we did over $85 million with all the companies. And Tasty Catering is solidly in the top 4 in Chicago, and probably number 1 for outdoor events and number 1 for corporate events. But all this change happened because of people, understanding the skills of people.
And the catalyst was back in 2005, where 2 young folks walk in the office, 22 years old, and say to you, Tom, we've had enough. Either you've changed or we go. And it's just remarkable how that change over this period of time, 20 years, but has taken you from a business that's a few million in revenue to 85 million in revenue, a change in leadership and leadership style. And I think listening to you, there's very few CEOs who one can listen to can kind of speak to their core values. They might be up on the wall somewhere, but can't recall them or speak to them. How do you keep those core values alive in your business? And
there's the biggest challenge as a chief culture officer, as a leader, is making it part of your essence. There's a great academic, Edgar Schein. He passed away about a year ago, and I happened to meet him and had a conversation with him. And the Academy of Management, an international group of academics in the field of management, there's about 12,000 members, recognize Edgar Schein as the thought leader for culture. And he wrote some wonderful books on culture. But he has a pyramid model for culture, and he says you have to have clearly stated values, and then you have to have artifacts that support them, and then you want to make those subconscious, or it has to become an assumed behavior. And so we weren't practicing it when we started this. It wasn't happening. It wasn't alive. It was just on the wall. And after the initial excitement of having it on the wall, the application process became a problem. So I remembered from my AA meetings that we would repeat the 12 steps before every meeting. I am powerless over alcohol. And so we started repeating the whole culture statement before every meeting of 5 people or more, including every leadership team meeting, every team meeting. And, if the meeting started at 1 o'clock, everybody would be looking at the clock and someone would blurt out, we'll always be more ethical than legal, because they wanted to be the leader. And then it would go around a clockwise circle and everybody would repeat one. And sometimes you were repeating the core values 3 times a week, and it became conscious, subconscious, subliminal. It became the assumed behavior. It's just the way you are. And Schein also has 6 steps on how to embed it deeply in the culture. And we didn't read Schein when we first started doing this, but we were fortunate that it worked out. One of them is to use it in your speech, your vocabulary, because the leaders are always watched, they're always listened to, they're always talked about. The most talked about person in a company is usually the CEO. And so if the CEO is using the core values in their culture, people become aware, using it in their vocabulary, then people become aware of it. And it becomes part of their life.
I owe you some credit on that. I've been wondering where I heard about bringing the core values into the meeting if there were 3 or more people. And I think it goes back to you, how do you bring those core values alive? And one of the things I've been telling the business teams that I work with is, if you get into your morning huddles or your weekly meetings and there's more than 3 people in those meetings, or any meeting where there's more than 3 people, go around the room and call out your core values. And that I've just made the connection. That comes from you, Tom. I forgot about that. Thank you very much.
Well, honored to share that.
Yeah, because one of the first things you hear is, let's print them out and put them up on the wall. But that just doesn't work. It's so much bigger than that. And I also feel like you talk about having a culture. I think of the way you describe it is freedom and discipline. And I feel like those core values have become maybe the boundaries for that, or the guidelines for that culture that you've created. Is that how you've done that?
Yes. When we hire people, we're very focused on making sure they understand the culture and they understand the philosophy of our behavior. And it's a very important requirement. And there's certain ways that we can watch their eyes when they're reading the statement to see if they have questions. But people are attracted. I met Sue Funkhausen. We probably met her together when the Small Giants were in San Francisco.
Yes.
And she's an organizational development specialist. And she said that the culture has 4 distinct advantages for an entrepreneurial company. And one of them is it attracts like-minded people. Yeah. So Jamie and her marketing company market Tasty Catering's culture, and we bring people to us that want to work at a place like that with that culture. And I speak a lot at universities. And we have our special event team is made up, our sales team and event designers are usually young ladies, because they know what weddings are all about. They're familiar with the style of weddings at that time. The older women, as they get more mature, the older women start working on corporate events. But speaking in classrooms at hospitality, schools of hospitality and universities, the last 4 hires we have, 4 superior young ladies, all came from these universities when I talked about our culture. And they wanted to work at a place where at 22 or 23, they were treated with respect and they were treated with dignity, and their brains were important, and they were free to design whatever they wanted to, but they were responsible to explain why they charged what they charged. And we coupled that with the great game of business so everybody understands financial literacy. So even dishwashers understand what they're doing, what impact it makes on the company's profit and loss statement, and their own bonus system, which is tied into the profit and loss statement. So Sue was the one in a Small Giants meeting in 2014, I think it was,
Yeah,
that
this
told me about these 4 points, and she was absolutely right. And one of the things that she said, John, that I thought was amazing is it increases the discretionary efforts because people are enthused about the values. And I didn't really understand that until I talked to a friend of mine that's an industrial psychologist. And he asked me to start going to psychologist conventions and meetings. And so I could understand more about the thinking process in a company. And we found out that according to the Institute of Wellness, Mental Health and Wellness, that the average human being has 60,000 thoughts every single day. 60,000 thoughts.
wow.
But the average employee only gives their employer 4% of those thoughts every day. And I was dumbfounded at that. 4%? And, there's so many other thoughts, like right now my eye is tearing. I need to wipe the tear off my eye. All these other thoughts that come up distract from your work. And so
Yeah.
one day I was cleaning the office because my job on Saturday, part of my, everybody does something extra in our company, is I clean the office on Saturday, the administration office. And I was cleaning the office one Saturday and I thought, what if we went to 8%? What if we could double the industry norm or the norm from 4% to 8%? How much would that be? So I went over to a calculator and I did calculations, and it was 250,000 more positive thoughts. And I was dumbfounded. I said, wow. And so then I called up my industrial psychologist friend and I said, what's the biggest destroyer of discretionary thoughts? Because Sue had put into my head that it increases the discretionary efforts and the discretionary thoughts, but I never really understood in detail. And so this man told me, he said, well, the biggest enemy of discretionary thinking, positive discretionary thinking, is disruptors.
Hmm.
So immediately we have a good to great council meeting every month, and I made a part of the rotation of topics were disruptors. Every team come into the meeting and sit down and say, this is what our biggest disruptor is. This is causing us the most angst, the most conversations. And one of our ladies in the office, Jody Beck, just a superior, sweet, lovable lady, wonderful person, had her back to the door from the ops room. And that's where she sat when she was selling. And I said, all right, Jody, what about the office, the sales office? What issues do you have? And she says, that damn door. It opened and shut 104 times yesterday. And I thought, she counted how many times it opened and shut? Wow, I bet she didn't do much selling. And she said, and it squeaks, it makes a loud noise and it's irritating. I said, okay, I wonder how many times they've discussed this, her and her team, 3 other ladies. I wonder how much that was discussed. So that night, my brother lubricated the door and changed the door closer so it shut better. And the next day, we started redesigning the office and turned her cube around. So instead of with her back to the door, she was facing the door with a 5-foot partition with a window in so she could see who was coming through that door. And her sales performance went on a 45-degree angle up because that disruptor was pulled out of her, and now she was able to sell. She was happy. And of course, as her sales went up, I kept reinforcing it by saying, wow, Jody, you're on fire. You're awesome. You're incredible. And that just kept stoking the flames. So disruptors are the enemy of a good culture and the things that can take away from. So we identify that and we talk about that.
And there's so many disruptors in the workplace, whether it's the quality of the internet through to things that you talk about like doors, that if they were just sorted out would make those people, our people, so much more productive. But you've had some times, I suppose, through 2008, 2009, where there's been real disruptors for people in terms of kind of the thoughts that they're having and what's going on. And that you've managed to remove those disruptors as well in terms of kind of family well-being and looked after the well-being of your people through that time.
Yes. Yeah, that brings to mind something that happened in 2008 or 2009. Maybe it was February of 2009. And the President of the United States had declared uh, corporate holiday parties to be a waste of money and that we shouldn't be doing those kind of things. We had just had the big financial crisis in the United States. And so we lost a tremendous amount of money because in the wintertime, uh, Christmas parties, corporate parties, give us the cash we need to get through January and February, which is the slowest months in the hospitality industry. And so it was really bad. In January, the first leadership meeting in January, we decided that we were going to have to cut people if it got to a certain level. And so we went to all of our team leaders and talked to them and said, your team needs to lose X amount of people and we need to lay off people or fire them. And the first one that I was going to, was the kitchen staff. And we decided that we were going to fire 5 people. And the kitchen team leaders had agreed to that. So in February of 2009, Tim's our CFO, he was one of the leaders of the change, went to Mari Carmen Rios, who was the number 2 leader in the kitchen. And she's the heart and soul of this company. Her heart and her soul is the support basis for our culture. And we said, all right, Mari, who are the 5 people you're going to fire? And she looked at me and I said, all right, we'll be back in a little bit. I just need to know the names. So I came back a little bit later and I said, who are the 5 people? And she said, Tom, we're not going to fire anybody. What? And she said, it violates our core values. Treat all with respect. Yeah. How do you treat someone with respect when you fire them for no reason? And ethical, we follow Immanuel Kant's 4 terms of ethics, and one of them is you cannot financially hurt anybody. You can't harm other people, and that's psychologically, emotionally, physically, or financially. And she said, it's going to be unethical, and it's not treating them with respect. We're violating core value 1 and 2. So we're not going to fire anybody. And my face was the color of your glasses. And they look red to me today.
Red, yes.
So my face was bright red. Tim had told me, he says, boy, I thought you were going to have a heart attack. You were so upset. And so for some reason, thank God, I said to her, Mari, what do you suggest? Because I learned to ask employees what their thoughts were on these issues. And she said, well, we all talked about it. All the culinarians talked about what we were going to do. And we decided we didn't want to lose anybody, that we all needed the job for our families. But we all agreed that we were going to take 5 hours less a week. We're going to drop from 40 hours to 35 or 32. And that will give you 7 people, the savings of 7 people, not 5. And I gave her a hug. I said, you are a wonderful lady. Thank you, Mari. And that was the first major use of the core values to change the specter of the company. And we did it again during the COVID issue, but that empowered the employees to make a decision. Can you imagine if I would have gone to employees and told them, you're going to go down to 32 hours a week. Yeah. You're going to lose 1 day a week. So everybody then say, well, why don't you just fire the worst person? What are you doing this to me? I'm a chef. I'm an important part of this company. So by doing it themselves, voluntarily, intrinsically from themselves, for an altruistic purpose, it was understood and agreed upon. And it wasn't too long, a couple of months later, we were all back to 40 hours, and I would have had to hire 5 people back that I fired, which I'm sure they wouldn't have come because people have pride and dignity. And there's another point about using the core values, and this was shortly after we did the culture statement. We had an employee who created a $4,000 error. And I'm reading the after action report in the middle of the night. I get up and have a bottle of water, and I look at the computer screen, and I'm seeing the after action report about this wedding. And it said, why didn't we charge for liquor? Why did we give all the liquor away? And of course, the employees are getting a percentage of profit. They want to know, why did we
give it away?
It cost me money.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't go to sleep. I was livid. And the next morning, I waited for Sherry. Sherry was the salesperson. And Sherry comes into the office, and I walk up to her desk and I start grilling her, with intense fury. And the whole office became very quiet. There were like 15 people listening to me. And Sherry turned around and said to me, "Is this number two? Treat all with respect."
Okay.
And I said, this was the first time anybody had ever been called out, even though everybody was trained on how to use it. She was the first person to use it this way, and I was the guy being called out.
And it's the boss. She's not there. There was no fear.
No fear.
People felt they could call out. They could even call you out.
Yeah, she said internally she was frightened, but she wasn't going to show the fear to me.
Yeah.
She just said, "Is this number two?" And I says, "No, it's not. Treating you with respect, it's not. I am sorry. But it's what you did 3, 5, and 7. And 3 is quality in everything we do. And 5 is a strong determination to be the best, competitiveness. And number 7 is responsibility, freedom and responsibility within your circle of discipline." Her circle of discipline was selling the job and entering it right. And she said, "No, I made a mistake. I just didn't hit the button in the computer that applied that charge because I was all done with the order and it was just an oversight." And she said, "I apologize too." And that day at lunch, she stood up and apologized to the company for costing us $4,000. Everybody clapped for her for doing that. And that was the end of that.
Wow. You don't see that often in companies. I think somebody would have been out the door there. But I'm curious about the circle of discipline then. So what is that circle of discipline?
Well, the circle of discipline comes from Jim Collins's book. It's part of his book, but I believe it came from Immanuel Kant originally, because Immanuel Kant believed that total freedom exists within a circle of discipline. So in a circle that what he used as an example was a corral. And the horses would be walking around and they'd be eating and defecating and they'd be drinking and they'd be urinating and they'd run and then they'd sleep. So they were totally free to do whatever they want, but they were within that discipline. They were within the walls of the corral. And so our staff knows their circle of discipline is what they do every day, what their responsibilities are. For a team leader, it's running this event and making sure it's done properly and it's done within our values and it's profitable and our employees are led the right way. That's their circle of discipline. That's what they're in charge of. Then they're free and they're responsible to the company to do it right, but they're free to make changes as long as they can explain why. And that goes back to the values, because, like the girl who canceled the picnic, and there was a lot of money she gave back to the company. It was over $5,000. She said it was my responsibility to produce something that was up to our expectations, up to our values, and it wasn't. It was my responsibility to do the right thing and take care of the client. And so I told them it was no charge. 19 years old. I thought, that's brilliant. And now she's an assistant principal of a nearby school, but those are the type of things that are part of the company tribal stories that we teach employees when they're being onboarded and they go through a culture class. Another small giant, Ari Weinswig, that we both know from Zingerman's Deli, he still personally teaches his culture course to all of his employees. And so I've used him as a peer mentor, and I try to teach all of our employees the onboarding culture class. They understand the background of the company.
You have a whole TC University. I think I remember once coming to visit Tasty Catering and having lunch with everybody, and they may have been calling out their numbers on the great game of business, but I also noticed the TC University. How have you integrated learning into the business? Because it feels like it's a big part of Tasty Catering.
Yes, I think people that I want to be with are people that want to learn and people that want to continue to learn. And you don't need to stop learning when you're 40 years old or 30 years old. It isn't just your educational years up into your early 20s. But I thought I was getting a great joy out of discovering academia again from a very better advantage point. Um, Trying to understand what emotional intelligence was, trying to understand what ethical behavior was. So I thought, why not let everybody in the company know that? So their discretionary thoughts would be based more on a positive basis than just a hypothetical problem that might happen because someone didn't take the garbage out or some stupid thing. Give them something to think about and talk about as a team. So TC University allows 8 hours of paid time a year to go sit in a classroom. And
Okay.
two classes are required. First is culture and second is leadership, because we want everybody to understand what a leader is so they can hold me accountable and they can learn how to lead. Because, isn't it great to run an organization where you have 80 leaders and
Yeah.
they all understand what it means to be a leader and they understand the issues that their leader may have and how to support them?
And they're all
So,
growing at the same pace as the business. You're kind of lifting them at the same pace.
right. So, we started doing the great game of business. And I'm looking at there's probably only 10% of the company that has a college degree. And they're struggling with financial literacy. They don't know what a profit and loss statement is. They don't know what a balance sheet is. And they're just sitting there looking at the documents like, so we started teaching financial literacy. What does it mean? And what you do, how does that impact it? And how does a company make profit? And how do we get the profit back into your pocket? One of the advantages that Tasty Catering has is TUI Capital, one of our companies, lends money to employees when they have need at a very low percentage. And I think the federal government imputes 1% interest or 2%. But if you have a need, you can come to and ask for a loan. And we've lent $25,000, $35,000 out to employees that are buying homes that have a short-term need. And if you ask for money twice in 1 year, you have to go to a financial budget class.
Okay.
And it's run by a lady in our company who is a certified financial planner and used to plan professional athletes' personal finances. And she'll go over a family's books and find out what their debt load is. And she's come back to us and said, you need to lend them $5,000 more to pay off their credit card debt so their interest drops so they can afford to make their payments. And then she teaches families how to live within a budget and how to think about it. So, and then we teach emotional intelligence as another class about how to perceive what others are thinking and how others' actions are. So thinking from without yourself, not within all the time. But all these classes are filled with people from different teams. There might be a chef, a delivery driver, an event producer, a salesperson are sitting in there and they're talking, and they get a chance to talk across the table with other team members and learn together.
Pollination and learn together. The teams that learn together grow together.
Yeah.
And with that financial help and the education, again, you're pulling out those disruptors. You're kind of
Yes.
moving them out of the way and making sure that people can focus on what they need to be doing at the office.
Instead of obsessing about the cost of how am I going to make money, now they're obsessing about how to make money because now they understand how to do it and they understand the path to making more money.
I've also been very curious about this term, or this kind of magical term, entangled organizations. What is an entangled organization? What does that mean?
Well, a young lady told me once the difference between engagement and entanglement was an engagement was like a college athlete. A company is fully engaged and they are like college athletes. They go to school, but they also train for their athletic performance. And she said an entangled employee is like an Olympic athlete. Their whole life is about becoming better.
Okay.
Their whole working life is about becoming the best athlete they could be. And that's the difference between engaged and entangled. And entangled means that our interpretation of entangled means that everything about the company is important to them, not just what their duties are. It's about the image of the company. It's about the way the company is approaching new challenges. It's the way the company is handling financial challenges like COVID. We went through COVID and we had 80 full-time employees thinking, how are we going to make it through this? What are we going to do? And that's so much different than having people can be engaged because they show up at work and contribute to work and they're happy with the people they're doing, but they're not giving us that extra discretionary effort.
Yeah.
So it's, I felt during COVID that we had like 60 CEOs in the company because they were coming up with some brilliant thoughts and ideas on how to survive.
And because you've made that investment in them up to that point in the education, you talk about having a lot of people who haven't got college degrees in the workforce, but coming into Tasty Catering, going through Tasty University in the education, you have 60 CEOs in the room because you've invested them. And so when you hit a crisis, you can deal with it.
They know, isn't it wonderful when your employees know as much as you?
Yeah.
And they share the same fears and the same concerns and the same thought. When I drive home at night, I wonder how many other staff members at Tasty Catering are driving home thinking the same thing, because we share it. There's no projections in their mind that are not truthful. They understand. During COVID, every day at lunch, I made myself visible and I would stand there. We have lunch every day at 12:30. We lock the doors. You've been there for lunch.
Yes, I've been there for lunch. Fantastic.
We all sit down and we converse together, and I would be there every day to answer questions about where the money is and how the money is. And it was amazing to listen to some of their thoughts during lunch. Have we thought about doing this? Why don't we do that? Here's wouldn't this be an opportunity? And I was really amazed because that's an entangled employee. They're thinking, I'll give you an example of an entangled employee. We were the only major caterer to stay open in Chicago during COVID. Two of our competitors fired their whole staff, fired everybody. And one laid them off. So it's just a technical term. But during our meeting on March 15th or March 18th, the governor shut down hospitality in the state of Illinois on March 18th of 2020. We had a meeting on March 18th, and it was whether we stay open or not. And one of our employees pointed to the core values on the wall and said, if we fire employees, we're violating core values 1 and 2, and we'll never be the same company again. Might as well burn that whole statement down. And this was an immigrant from Mexico with not much more than a high school degree.
Wow,
and he is our executive chef, and we helped send him through chef school. Brilliant chef and the best leader I think I've ever met in my life. He said, we are no longer that company. We're going to be something completely different. And he said, I don't want to be a different company. I want this company to survive. So I want to stay open. And I said, well, how are we going to stay open? And our financial person, Bobby, who you also know, she's my wife, but she's a brilliant girl. She's the certified financial planner with a master's in finance. She had made sure the company was set up with no short-term debt, a lot of lines of credit, a lot of balance in our real estate ownings. So we had money. We had enough money to survive, and she had given us a time period and said we could last for a while. So the employees voted to stay open because it was the right thing to do. How do you stay open when there's nobody working, nobody buying a product? So the employees came up, the leadership team came up with some restrictions, like salaried employees would make 90% of their salary, but they had to work. And they could work from home, but they had to still be selling. They still had to be doing the administration tasks. And the hourly people were going to go down to 30 hours a week. They were going to lose 25% of their hours. And then Mari Carmen came back and she said, we have a lot of mothers that work in the kitchen and their schools are closed, so the children are home. They have to be at home and they can't work their 30 hours, but they should be paid because it's not a choice they had. Yeah. It's the right thing to do. It's treating them with respect. And so we paid those moms. The funny thing is that the moms started bringing their children together so 2 moms could come into work. They wanted to get away from the kids, come in and have coffee and make food and chat. And so it was a punishment almost to stay at home with the kids and babysit. And then she said anybody over the age of 60 is in a big risk category and they should stay home from work and they should be paid. And so we agreed to do all this, but we said you got to help us find the answers. You have to help us find business. There are going to be people in a city of 9 million people that are going to need food, but where are they? So one of the jobs we got was the National Guard. It was working out of downtown Chicago to help inoculate people with the vaccines and do other things. And we were the only caterer open in the city of Chicago that could serve 3 meals a day, 24 hours a day, every day of the week. So we got that job. And one of our employees was driving down. He did the morning run and one of the afternoon runs. And he didn't come back from his morning run on time. He came back about 2 hours late. And so when Tony came back in the company, when he came back he was asked, where are you? Where were you? How come it took you 2 extra hours? And Tony said, I've got the answer. Here's the answer. And the answer, he's holding up his phone. And we're located in Elk Grove Village in the state of Illinois in the USA. And Elk Grove Village is the largest industrial park in the United States. It's 6 square miles of industry. And 100,000 employees come to work every morning to Elk Grove Village for the first shift, day shift. And 100,000 people go home between 3 and 5. And all the parking lots were empty. And all the restaurants were shut down. And the streets were barren. But Tony found a parking lot that was filled with cars. So he took a picture of the parking lot, and then he took a picture of the company's name. And after he came back from downtown, he went up and down the streets of Elk Grove, all 6 square miles, taking pictures of the parking lots with the pictures of the company name. And he gave it to our salespeople, and that was worth about $500,000 because we were the only food caterer that could deliver. These were companies making masks, shields, and other necessary equipment. And that was one employee, a delivery driver, who came up with a saving idea and making the company safe. And there were about 20 stories like that about how employees came up with brilliant ideas on how for us to continue to stay in business.
So those intangible employees are deeply connected into the fabric of the business.
Yes. Now, the engaged employees would show up for work and do what they're supposed to do every day and be very happy and very engaged. But the entangled people are like an owner driving home wondering, now, how do we survive tomorrow? How are we going to do this? And that's the entangled employee, and that's the one who's deeply woven. And we wrote a book about small companies. I wanted to know what really made small companies great. What was the difference? And I was stimulated by our friend Bo Burlingham's Small Giants. These were great companies, but I kept entering best places to work with small companies, and I kept seeing the same companies winning. And I thought, what makes them so special? And so I asked a couple of professors if they would like to co-write a book and do the research, because I wanted to be academic focused. I wanted to have evidence-based research with empirical data, and it could be used in the classroom. And the book is used in the classroom. And it covers, I think, 6 or 8 companies that were always winning awards. And one of the companies was a car wash.
Ah, okay.
And I thought, Mike's Express Car Wash, they beat Tasty Catering out for a national award for best place to work. And they were based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I thought, a car wash is a great place to work. So the next day, I'm in Indianapolis getting my car washed at Mike's Express Car Wash.
Okay.
Because I wanted to see. And I asked the young man, congratulations, you just won the best place to work. And, oh, yes, that was wonderful. I said, what makes you so different? And he pulls out a card from his pocket. He said, it's our core values. Here they are.
Again.
And I was dumbfounded. And as we researched these companies, we found they all were very high engagement, only their employees were entangled. They were beyond engaged. And so that's where the entanglement part came in.
And It's My Company Too, right? The book.
Yes.
Yes. So we'll make sure we put that into the notes as well.
And it's a funny story about It's My Company Too is that title came from a Tasty Catering employee. And he was a brand new employee. He'd come here because his uncles and his cousins worked here. And he was 19 years old, and he was walking through our warehouse. He'd been here about a month or 6 weeks, and he was walking through the warehouse, and I had gone to the warehouse to pay for a beer delivery. We have to pay for alcohol in the state of Illinois when it's delivered. You can't charge it. Okay. And I heard an employee screaming at another employee. I heard a crew leader screaming. Well, you can't raise your voice because it creates an amygdala hijack, which means that your thinking stops and you react and you become emotional. And so Tasty Catering, it's against the rules to raise your voice. You can't do that. So I heard the voice raising and I started to walk over to it and I saw Hugo Rios going in front of me. And he walks up to the college leader who was yelling at his staff because they loaded some food on the wrong truck. And he was yelling at them. And Hugo said to the guy, "Hey, stupido, numero dos, number two,
Yeah.
treat all with respect." And I was thinking, if that college kid makes a slurrious remark about this Mexican kid who told him that, I'm going to fire him on the spot. But the college kid turned to the high school boys and he said, "My apologies. I shouldn't have been yelling at you, but it was my mistake. We need to change how we're doing this." So I turned the corner and I went up to Hugo and I gave him a Chicago handshake. And a Chicago handshake has a $20 bill in your hand, and you shake hands with the maitre d' or the parking valet, and you always get perfect service. So I gave him, and he took the $20 bill, he looked at it and he gave it back to me. He said, "It's my company too." And I was shocked because that was about 20% of his pay for that day was $20. So that's where the title for the book came.
I could carry on talking to you for hours, Tom, but I'm conscious of the time. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, you are surrounded by some amazing young people at Tasty Catering, and you talked about the experience with Jamie and how that kicked off the transformation, and all these other fantastic folks, the drivers, who are going around and finding cars in parking lots. You have this amazing ability to tune into different generations. What are you learning from the young generation at the moment? What kind of wisdom are you picking up from them now?
I'm picking up the fact I'm mentoring 3 kids that have just graduated from college. And what I'm finding out is that there's a clear separation between college graduates who want to work and college graduates that don't want to work, that are minimalizing how much effort they have to extend to get a paycheck. And it's becoming clearer to me how to get good employees out of college that want to work and want to become a star. And what does it take to become better and to hire these kind of folks? I'm very shocked because I'm a boomer, obviously, and I grew up after the generations of the Second World War where work was important and work was a way of life. And COVID helped accent the fact that you could stay at home and not do anything, work from home. Well, you only work half the time and you get paid for a full-time job. So the wisdom I'm getting, that's a very interesting point. I think young people have 3 major facets and old people have 3 major assets. And the younger people have understanding the marketplace. They know what needs to be bought, what needs to be manufactured, what needs to be sold. They understand marketing, how to communicate through social media or whatever. And they have knowledge, they understand technology. Most older people don't do very well in those 3. Like, I bought my last lawnmower. I'm not going to buy another snowshoe. I don't buy anymore. But older people have 3. We have access to capital. We know how to find money. We have contacts. We know who people are, and if you need some favors. And the last thing we have is wisdom. Wisdom learned from years of being alive. And so I like to find, and I like our teams, our companies, to find young people that supply the knowledge and the marketing and the knowledge of the marketplace, and couple them with older people that have wisdom and can make connections for them. And so that's the eternal challenge for me, is how to bring in young people and keep them engaged and turn them into entangled.
Yeah, it's such a big challenge at the moment, isn't it? You're right. It feels like there's this kind of split. Half don't really want to do anything, and the other half of the folks want to be involved and want to do something. But it's a big challenge right now, and it feels like we already have a skills sort of shortage in terms of people and labor. But yeah, people just don't want to come into the office.
I don't think they understand the need for it. They don't have children yet. They don't have need for a home. They're living with mom and dad. But, an interesting thing is I think about the young people we've hired in the last couple of years and how they're not party people. Even though they're attractive, healthy, normal kids, they're not about partying. They're about growing. They want to grow. They want to learn. And it's another point about our company, Jean, is that being an alcoholic and a drug addict, I can recognize those kind of issues in people just in talking to them, personal habits. And Tasty Catering has nobody in their 80 full-time employees and probably 30 part-time employees. Nobody has an alcohol or drug problem, and neither do their children. And that's another positive attribute for core values and following core values is people don't have to go home frustrated because of behaviors at work and then drink or get high or do something else. And that's critically important. We've won 2 awards from the American Psychological Association and from the psychologically healthiest workplace in America. And to me, those are the most important awards we've ever won. And, if you provide a healthy workplace, you'll find people that want that. And that's where we're fortunate getting these young people that really want to grow.
That's so powerful. What's the future for Tasty Catering and all the businesses? How are you thinking? I think of Brad Herman and Aria talking about employee trusts, and others talking about ESOPs. What's the future for you? How are you thinking about the legacy for the businesses you're involved in, the staff, the people?
Well, we're not going to do an ESOP and we're not going to sell. We explored selling outright and we kept our employees involved in the process. They knew the day we signed the contract why we're going to explore it. We walked away from a sale because we didn't think they would treat our employees with dignity and respect. And so we decided to keep it, and we're transitioning it to employees.
Okay.
My son and daughter are going to be owners of the company. Jamie, the other CEOs that started their businesses are going to get more of the companies. Jamie already is a major shareholder in the 2 businesses she started. But the beauty of running a company with the great game of business, the financial transparency, is that employees are owners. They're making decisions and they're getting rewards. Like the last quarter of last year, our employees got 4 weeks paychecks because we hit certain bonus figures. So they're getting the privileges of being an owner. They have a voice in the way the company works, and they get a percentage of the profits without having the responsibilities of being up for litigation and all the other trying processes, the negatives, signing documents for loans. Yeah. So they have the privileges of being an owner without the responsibilities. And I've not found anything that suits our company like an ESOP that would be any better than the way it is now. They have the privileges, but they don't have the responsibilities. And no one has expressed an interest in buying into the company. No one's expressed an interest of ESOP. It's a powerful combination to be able to say, I can open my mouth about anything that goes on at the company, put my 2 cents worth in, and it'll be listened to, and I get a percentage of the profits.
Yeah. It's my company too, but I don't need to be a shareholder per se. I own part of, I treat the company as if I'm an owner anyway, and I'm getting a reward for that or percentage of the profits for that.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
And that's why we're doing, I have a friend, Rich Panico, who owns Integrated Project Management. You may know of Rich. He's been Small Giants. He wasn't there this year, but he's got a very successful project management company, and he's getting his doubts right now about ESOP. He's been fluctuating about whether he should do it or not. And some of my other friends are, but it's good for some companies, but it's not for us. It's not what we're going to do. We want everything to continue going forward with the right ownership in place.
Tom, what are you working on right now?
Trying to get out of work. I'm doing a lot of mentoring and advising internally and externally. A lot of the book is used in college classrooms, and invariably it'll be young people that ask me for advice and would I mentor them. And I have quite a few people that I'm mentoring and connecting into business circles. That keeps me busy. But I'm retired from the operations of all the companies. I just participate in guidance meetings, quarterly meetings. So I'm visible every day. I come into work and I sit in my own office. I go over The catering building is next to the building I'm in right now. And I go over and have lunch and talk to employees. But I'm trying to get away from it. It's an addiction, you know. I started my first business in 1971, and it's hard not to be an owner. It's hard not to be thinking like that.
It's so ingrained, as you say. It's kind of an addiction, and you're probably one of the best persons of being able to call that out.
Yeah, I think sometimes I get upset because I have nothing to be worried about. There's no business problem that I have to think about today.
It's a good place to be in, isn't it?
I think I'll go home and I'll cut the grass or trim the rose bush. What am I going to do?
I really appreciate your time. If anybody wants to reach out to you, LinkedIn, what's the best place to get hold of you?
LinkedIn will let me identify who they are by face, but they can also contact me at tom@tastycatering.com.
Okay.
I'll respond to every email. I guarantee I'll respond to every email, but it might be a day or two if I'm out traveling or doing something. But I'd be glad to contact and communicate with anybody.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. And thank you for spending the time with me.